started.
Cool. We didn't have a lot of obvious stuff for the agenda today. It's basically updates, and I thought we could spend the extra time we might have available to just go through the triaged issues list and start parceling out work that can be done in parallel from that list. Anybody else got anything else that they would like to add to the agenda today that isn't already represented? If so, please go for it.
I'll just say that I started doing the name changes on the SIG. I'm trying to think what's left. I think other than maybe references in the repo that still speak to Federation rather than multi-cluster, all of the
this meeting name.
Oh, right. And the meeting name. All the other labels, GitHub accounts, and mailing list changes have been moved over. That's it.
Sorry, I just had to shut a dog up there. Excuse me. I'm back again. Yeah, so it sounds like that's sort of partially done, but not yet complete. Is that right?
No, it's mostly done. I mean, the thing is, I'm not sure I want to recreate a calendar invite.
You should just be able to rename the meeting in the calendar invite.
Maybe I'll just rename the meeting. Yeah, I think it's just the meeting then.
Yeah.
One other thing is I'm still waiting on Paris Pittman for her to give us a essentially, I think it's some account that allows us to create a Zoom meeting, so host this meeting on Zoom rather than Hangouts. So we dropped that dependency on having a Googler at all times to make the Hangout work.
Yeah.
And apparently those accounts come out of Linux Foundation, and there's a delay. So she's going to get back to me whenever that happens, and I'll send out another email to the list to say that that move has completed.
Just a note for anybody like Red Hat that uses Gmail but doesn't enable Hangouts. I found that if you join with your personal email, like one of the Google groups, you will be on the invite list and you will not need to be allowed to enter. You'll just enter automatically. It's a setting on the google.com Hangouts.
Interesting.
Okay.
Did I understand that correctly? You don't. We don't actually need to move. We can stay here and just check that box.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, we can look into it and potentially do some experiment. What we found is that every time this meeting happens, one of us has to be here in this room pushing the X person is allowed to join this call, and it's generally for everyone in the meeting, except maybe one or two people.
I guess.
So Maru, I usually end up having to do it for you as well.
Because I'm joining from my personal account and I'm not like, so I did this with SIG testing. SIG testing has an even harder time in inviting people for some, or like allowing people for some reason. So I was just missing stand-ups with them. And then someone pointed out that google.com domains require authorization for anybody who's not part of the group. So when I joined with my personal account, when next time I joined the Hangout, I just went in automatically and they didn't have to do anything. So that's because Red Hat doesn't actually enable Hangouts for our Red Hat email accounts. So, but all I have to do is join with my personal and just, don't get email updates, and things work great. So I think a Googler probably has to start the meeting though. I'm not saying that dependency is not there just for Red Hatters or other people who use Google Apps for their mail.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily a big deal. I would be concerned though if we have some sort of internal conference that takes us all away and so none of us can attend the meeting.
No, I mean, clearly having any Googler who has to push buttons is not desirable. I'm pretty sure that if people are on the Federation mailing list and that email address is logged into Hangouts, and the appropriate checkbox is checked, I believe that that it is possible to get around that. I've done it in the past. The same applies to permissions on documents, like documents that are attached to the calendar invitation, provided that you're on the invite list, which includes the Google group that is invited to the meeting, then the permissions on the documents are updated correctly. But if you log in as a different account on Hangouts than the one you're signed up as or invited as, then you end up with complications. But maybe we should just, I mean, it certainly is a bit of a pain, even if it's possible, it often enough doesn't work properly, that we should perhaps just switch to Zoom. There's also, from my recollection, even on Google accounts, there's a limit of 25 attendees at a Hangout, unless you get like fancy settings, which we didn't have. So there's a fair chance that we might exceed that anyway. So let's just move to Zoom, I would suggest.
Agreed. Paris added that the recording options are actually better for moving the recording straight to YouTube.
That's a good thing too.
Okay, sounds good to me. So that's exceptionally good news. I just want to double check. So literally all references to Federation are kind of tombstoned with re-references to multi-cluster. Sorry, I stepped out from them, so I didn't follow all the detail there.
Yeah, I would say every reference that normally you would come across when you create a new SIG, yes, has been changed. But I mean, I'd caution anyone that comes across a document that has the word Federation. It's up to them to move it to multi-cluster.
Okay, that makes sense. As long as we've gone through the the obvious list of all the things, as you say, the calendar invite, the meeting recordings, the SIG mailing list and group name and all of that stuff. So did you manage to rename the Google Groups thing without having to chuck all of the members off?
Yes.
Oh, that is fantastic. Excellent. Thank you for the update. Right, back to...
One more thing, Christian, what about the Slack channel? Has it been renamed? Like, I have already been logged in since some time, but yeah.
No, I haven't done Slack.
Or do we create another channel over there?
I'm pretty much ready to pass the buck. If whoever wants to try to do the next thing with Slack channel, the mailing list was a big endeavor. The GitHub creation accounts as well. So if somebody wants to do something with the Slack channel, I'd be fine.
Yeah, I think as long as we know what is and isn't done, then we can, parcel out the work if you don't want to carry on doing it. But if we don't know what is and isn't done, it's difficult to do that.
Okay, so this counts as what isn't.
Well, so here's one thing that still needs to be done. Did you keep some sort of log of what you did do?
Yes, it's the mailing list, the GitHub accounts, and what's the other one?
I saw that teams
and the groups.
GitHub, yeah,
yes.
and those groups were also renamed appropriately.
So GitHub teams, the Google groups, and the GitHub accounts.
What exactly do you mean by GitHub accounts? The accounts which are used for the CI/CD jobs? That's what you mean? Or?
Was that like the @Kubernetes /SIG Federation?
Yeah, these are needed for the bots.
Is there some info about those accounts somewhere which can be referenced?
Yeah, I don't know that we use them all, but it's just part of the long list of items that I think Brian Grant put these together for what needs to be done for a SIG creation. I can pull it up. Okay,
so you did go through that whole list and it's all done, except
yes.
that the Slack channel is on that list and is not done. So is that the only thing that's on that list that's not done?
There's something I'm seeing that needs to be done. So in GitHub, I noticed you added a SIG multi-cluster label, but you left the SIG Federation label, and ideally the existing label would have been renamed so that all the existing issues have the SIG multi-cluster label instead of the SIG Federation label. And since you added it, you almost have to go back remove the SIG multi-cluster label, rename the SIG Federation label, and then add the issues back. There's about 11 issues that are in SIG multi-cluster instead of SIG Federation.
I had a discussion with I guess we have a program manager here who manages some of the labels, and he suggested moving it to obsolete rather than completely removing it.
I guess that's fine, but then you have to go back to 172 open issues and you have to relabel them, whereas if you rename it, it just happens when you rename it, all those open issues just automatically get that new label instead of having to be manually relabeled. So I'm not sure why that person would say that, but maybe they didn't understand what was involved.
So right now, my understanding is all the open issues should have both labels.
Given that SIG multi-cluster has 11 open issues and SIG Federation has 172, I don't think that's true. You can see this for yourself. If you go to KK, click on issues, click on labels, and then you can go and search for SIG multi-cluster and SIG Federation and verify that I'm not crazy.
Okay.
Is there a bulk edit on GitHub issues?
Yeah, there's a bulk edit. Maybe it's on the PRs that it's done and not on the...
Yeah, what Maru is saying is correct right now. And I remember one of the mails which Quinton or Christian, either of you raised as things that need to be done to change or rename the SIG. In that, one of the maintainers suggested that we can rename this the labels to SIG multi-cluster, and whichever are the federation issues, we can label them as area federation. Something like that. That's what I remember.
Yeah, Brian Grant suggested a two-level thing because we probably, I mean, again, this is more of a longer-term thing because I don't think we really have a lot that is not federation related in multi-cluster, but we will in over time. So the suggestion was we have SIG multi-cluster, and then the stuff that is pertaining to the current federation implementation, we can have an area called federation, and then in future we can have areas for other things. Like one today we would have is probably the cluster registry, which is again different.
That's right. So I think what Maru is suggesting can still be done because if you take account that multi-cluster has only around 11 issues, so we can maybe remove it, rename that SIG Federation to SIG multi-cluster, and then appropriately label the other 11 issues also.
I just had a thought though. Do we want to, like, there's some sort of script that will actually move issues to a different repo? Like, do we want to actually move?
That's a GitHub feature. That is a GitHub feature. So yeah, I was actually exploring that, moving the issues. I was actually exploring replicating the issues first. So if we are successfully able to replicate all those 100, whatever number, 170 or whatever number is there, issues to the new federation, we might be able to remove them from core Kubernetes.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest we must just make sure that we don't lose the trail, and also that we don't end up with duplicate issues where we end up with basically a fork in the conversation. So I'll leave it up to you, Irfan. You sound like you got it under control, but just a quick comment is that I would suggest that we duplicate all of the current issues into the new repo, close all of the old issues with references to the new issues that are taking over from them, just so that we have the full history without duplicate issues.
I think
yes, it makes sense, but there'll be one problem in automatically doing that is the issues which exist in KK would be created by different individuals, and one person might not have, probably a maintainer in KK might have rights on them, but one of the people, a person here might not have. I'm not sure. So that might be a problem.
Yeah, worth figuring that out. I agree. You know, if user XYZ created an issue, it should ideally be reflected as created by them in the new repo as well. But we don't need to figure out all the details.
Okay,
yet.
what I'll try to figure out what best we can do about this, and maybe put up a note in our SIG notes.
Yeah.
That
sounds great.
I'd recommend talking to some SIGs that are already managing their issues in repos, like SIG CLI is doing this, SIG Cluster Lifecycle is doing this. So there is prior art, and if there's issues they've encountered, that might be helpful for them to just tell you about it rather than you having to hit it for the first time.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, let's just, I think the move to a separate repo we can treat as a separate exercise, I would suggest, but let's at least get the current name change completed so that we've tidied up all the loose ends that exist.
I guess I just wasn't sure whether, like, if the issues in SIG multi-cluster, if they're targeted at the control plane or if they're actually more general. No. But where those issues
they're more general, and the ones targeted at the control plane should be labeled with area federation, as per the original name change PR Brian Grant commented on it.
Okay. And SIG cluster cluster registry. Why am I thinking it's something else? No, yeah. So the cluster registry, are they managing issues in their own repo, or are they doing anything? I'm assuming their own repo.
Yeah, for now I've been creating issues in the cluster registry repo itself.
I think that's good. That's where they belong. So okay.
And I guess as well, when the label, yeah, I mean, once the labeling strategy is understood for Federation and the right labels, I'll figure out what labels need to be applied there. That makes sense. I guess it'll probably be SIG multi-cluster and then area cluster registry.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just going to be in the cluster registry repo, I don't know why you need that actually. I think that you're only going to need like the labeling. I think that when you're targeting things at the milestone, if you're synchronizing release with KK, then maybe you need to worry about actually duplicating issues so that the release team can track them, at least right now. But hopefully that requirement will go away in the future.
Okay. I think it's also still to be determined whether the cluster registry will directly track releases with KK. My inclination right now is to say no, but that's something that I think is not necessarily worth figuring out in great detail immediately.
Yeah, agreed. I'm just like, I think that for now you track things in cluster registry and don't worry about KK unless you're synchronizing release.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, we may as well just keep going through this list then. Mike Rubin, is he here today?
No, he's not here. Paul is, though.
Say again?
Paul is, though.
Yeah, I think Mike was basically going to kind of corral that whole thing out. Paul, do you know what's going on with creating a on-call rotation of 12 people?
No, I spoke to Michael about this about a week and a half ago. He basically described the problem space to me, and since then I've been thinking about how we can make the rotation something that takes less time. I'm actually interested, Madhu, if you have some time this week, I'd love to talk to you about your experiences on the on-call rotation, and see if maybe I can, one, at least understand what the primary time sinks have been for that, and two, maybe bounce some ideas off you for how we might make it a little bit less of a thing.
So Madhu's not here right now. Can you email him that?
Yes, I will email him that.
Thank you.
Is it possible to decouple those two exercises? I mean, the one exercise is we need someone to be on rotation. And the proposal was we try and get 12. And then it seems like a separate requirement is to try and make sure those people are not wasting their time doing things that don't need to be done. Can we tackle the first of those without necessarily having solved the second yet?
Yeah, totally.
It just seems like the second one is kind of a never-ending problem from my experience with SRE. It's like an ongoing, sure the on-call people are not wasting their time.
Yeah, I agree. They're two separate things. I am going to have to check on my side to see what kind of resources we could put into it, but I do agree they're separate.
So we have other people present here today who have concrete experience, Shashi in particular and Irfan, who've been on call for many, many months now and can give you an indication of approximately how much time they spend when they're on call.
Yeah.
If that's one of the questions you're looking to answer. I can imagine if you're trying to decide who to put on the rotation, you need to know, are they dedicating 5% of their time or 50% of their time during the on-call week?
Yeah, that's definitely information that I'm interested in. I'd be happy to talk about it now. I also would be happy not to totally derail this meeting, so perhaps we can talk in the next day or two on Slack.
I think we have a little bit of time available, so I would be keen to kind of like move it forward if we can, rather than have it stalled for more time. So first of all, the target is is 12 people on the rotation, which if they do 1 week rotations, which is what we've been doing up to now, they would be on call for 1 week per quarter. And maybe one of the people who's been on call recently, there are several of them, can give us a sort of rough guesstimate as to what percentage of their time was occupied by on-call duties during the week they were on call.
Yeah, to hear that if someone's willing to talk about it now.
I would say that it's actually variable, but and it tends to be like more of a time if your turn comes up near a particular release, because any issue that creeps up or any issue that comes in this area is basically more problematic and need to be addressed immediately at the time of release. But I think this on-call was mainly because we used to hit problems of that that particular area where the clusters were not recycled, or the new cluster was not created for each pre-submit or each PR. It probably might be much more lesser when that issue is resolved, which I think Shashi is working on.
Yeah, and also we kind of met up with some issues inside Kubernetes also. Sometimes there are all kinds of patterns actually. Sometimes there is an infra issue, and sometimes there could be issues with the underlying Kubernetes cluster. So it happened quite a few times actually. So most of the time the Federation on call, like I think will be in a hot seat only if it is like blocking the PRs of others. But other than that, that can be taken slightly on within a day or two we can solve it. Apart from the pre-submit jobs.
So Shashi, only guesstimate for like if you are on call for a week, I think maybe 3 days on an average.
I don't think that's that much. I believe like it's like whenever you get a call. Yeah. So yeah, worst case if something gets broken, right? So maybe off a day you spend on that to solve it.
So one thing I'm interested in finding out is when you're on the on-call rotation, what percentage of the time is spent debugging infrastructure problems versus actual problems in the software itself? The reason I ask this, I'd be interested, since we're talking about adding new people to the rotation, whether we can point to X or Y thing that someone needs to be aware of, so that we don't like add people to this and then we still fundamentally have the same problems and they're compounded because people don't know what to look for. So I wonder if we have any kind of like triage guide or anything like that from the people that have been doing the on-call work so far that we can point to.
Yes, we do put together a document that lays out all of this. Basically, for having gone through this, I'd say there's 3 classes. of issues. One would be the result of the test infrastructure. So if there are changes in the test infrastructure, we're special enough such that other test suites will not be impacted, and we are. And test infrastructure just doesn't notice, so we're the first ones to notice. And in that case, you have to escalate to them. That would be people on SIG testing. Another class would be quota issues. Since in Federation we run multiple clusters, and right now all their testing is done on Google Cloud. A normal project's default quota is not large enough. So if somebody creates a new test suite in a new project, especially somebody in SIG testing, you will hit those limits, and then the test suite will fail. And then the other class, and that's kind of the more pernicious one, is where a failure occurs, but it's only visible in Federation, and there you kind of have to hunt down what the issue is, and you end up essentially doing what other SIGs should be doing, but it's just kind of the process. So that can be as simple as, if you're lucky, you can locate the last commit that caused the issue. If you're not lucky, you may have to do some bisecting yourself. Now, all that is compounded by the fact that we do a separate deployment of the I guess we'll call it the base clusters, and then the deployment of the actual control plane is decoupled. So kind of some work has to be done to try to test head on head, because we don't have that configuration other than in CI. But once you've done this enough, there's you kind of get the hang of it, but there is a learning curve.
But just to be clear there, Christian, so we've already decided that we're going to rebuild the clusters, was my understanding. And that was the work Shashi has done recently with parallelizing the builds, etc. And in that case, basically the PR that causes the per PR test to fail will have to be debugged by the writer of the PR. And so therefore that problem is no longer ours. The only reason it's a problem now is because we don't actually do per PR tests, and therefore the PRs that break Federation just go through and manifest later in our tests which fail, which therefore we have to debug them and triage the failures, etc. Is that a correct summary?
Yes, when that goes live, I don't know what the status of that is, but indeed, I'd agree with you. Whenever that goes live, it should simplify that case of the mismatched versions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's going to be compounded in the future. Like if you are moving out the Federation code.
No, it's going to be easier.
Oh, is it?
Okay, so once we're out of tree, no quota issues because we run way fewer jobs. And we're pinned to a version of cubes, and nobody is blocked when a breaking change is introduced. We can fix it however long we need, but it doesn't have to be immediately. So as far as I'm concerned, as soon as we get out of tree, suddenly on-call rotation, I don't think it's necessary anymore.
On-call rotation is fine, but what I meant is like the breaking changes will still go into the core Kubernetes, and maybe we need to either revert or do a workaround.
No, Shashi. See, what we plan to do is that use a particular commit hash from Kubernetes as a stable one or something on which all the tests pass, which will be rendered in the other repo, the Federation repo. So any change that happens in Federation repo is what need to be fixed, or if there is a problem there, would need to be fixed. But we would have ample amount of time, like we can delay moving to a newer Kubernetes repo hash or newer commit to whatever time we feel necessary. So it's not like something breaking things will break probably more than what they break now, but we would have ample amount of time to decide if we want to actually move to the new change or not.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think the
then
problem I foresee with that approach is that if we did a test against Kubernetes for every PR submitted to Kubernetes, if we did per PR federation tests, then the writer of the PR finds out immediately that they've broken federation, they can debug it and they can fix it, and they will have to fix it before their PR will.
Yeah, that's not
yes, so
viable. Sorry, because it's not just federation we're talking
hold
about.
on, let me just
Okay,
finish.
this is for all out of tree stuff that could be broken, and they're not going to be blocked.
No, I understand. Let me just finish. So the ones we found so far were actually bugs in the PRs.
That's not in question. We're going to find real bugs, but we're going to find it on a delay, and we're going to have to bisect and figure it out. And there's no option to go back and automatically make sure that the breaking change doesn't merge, is what I'm saying.
So those jobs can still be there at both a job like that could be there which matches head to head in Federation, and a job can be there in K8s, core K8s repo also. The only thing is that they need not be blocking, and they can be addressed when and as and when they want to be addressed.
I guess I question the value of doing that much.
Yeah,
because it's resource intensive.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree too. That feels like it will potentially end up as being a mostly red test that sits for a while. And once you have a red test, now another issue gets in and it's still a red test. And so I'm not necessarily sure if that adds much value unless it's actually a blocking test that people are fixing, which is problematic because it can't necessarily be a blocking test because for other reasons.
Well, it's not going to be blocking no matter what. Sorry, Quinn, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we should. I mean, we've done one iteration of these tests already, and we're going to have to do another one with the moving out of repo, et cetera. And I don't think we should necessarily try and solve all these problems now. But irrespective of which of these approaches we take, I think it is pertinent to point out that at some point with the new repo, we are going to have to vendor in a newer version of Kubernetes. And it's going to have, because it's never been tested against Federation, and experience has shown us that there are bugs in Kubernetes that were not picked up by Kubernetes regression tests and were only picked up by Federation tests, that there will be some of those bugs fairly frequently. And instead of the process being that the author of the PR with a bug in it finds out about it immediately and fixes it before they merge, it's basically going to fall upon the Federation team to identify what the bug is, possibly many months after the PR was written, and then file a bug against Kubernetes saying, X months ago, you guys created this bug, and then it's going to take some period of time to fix it.
That wasn't the suggestion.
Maybe unavoidable, but it's quite different than what we have today and what the rest of Kubernetes works on. So we just need to be aware of that and make sure that we deal with it appropriately.
That scenario I think would be very difficult because the number of bugs that would accumulate over a period of months. I'm not suggesting that we actually pin and hold that pin for months. The suggestion is that maybe we do it once a week or something, and we're testing at least once a day. And when we identify a bug, we automatically run bisect to try to narrow down the number of PRs that have to be evaluated as potentially introducing the problem.
Fair enough.
And then we'll automate, the repinning. Anyway, all I'm saying is like the timeline I think is going to be much quicker. It's just that when we do find a problem, it's not going to be like things are on fire. It's like we can take our time in fixing it, and we don't necessarily need an on-call rotation to do it. We just need people who are responsible for. We need an on-call rotation, but it won't necessarily be, oh no, things are breaking and you're blocking people. It's we can't go to a new version of Kubernetes until we resolve this. So please, make it a priority.
Yeah, this sounds like a possible approach to me and a workable approach to me. I don't think that we can have that the same kind of test blocking for core K tests because I'm not sure if those guys would be ready to take tests which are broken because of a repo which is external to core K-test. Does it happen for any other repo which is external, except for those staging repos? I mean, that was a question if anybody knows about that.
I mean, every product out there, whether it's Federation or anything else that is based on Kubernetes, if its tests are not run as part of the per PR tests of Kubernetes, then there are bugs that can manifest in Kubernetes that are not visible until they hit whatever that other dependent product is, whether it's OpenShift or any other commercial distribution or anything else that relies on Kubernetes. And those people then file bugs and they, hopefully eventually. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't properly capture that whole discussion, but if anyone has any inspiration, they can add some detail to item C there, and I can clean it up after the meeting. All right. We have 20 minutes left. So Nikhil did some communication around the on-call rotation. I don't know if there's anything to add there, Nikhil, other than it's done.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay. Someone mentioned there was a doc that Madhu had put together. I'm curious if someone can find a link to that and put it into the agenda so that I can take a look at it.
Oh, the on-call documentation?
Yes, I'll put it in the agenda.
All right, thanks.
Is Nikhil here? I guess not.
Nikhil is not here today.
Okay, so that answers that. But basically, he put a page together. I believe it's all done. Explains who's on call, and it's linked from the right places. And if anybody else, if anyone ever gets pinged about things that should be dealt with by the on call, they can just refer to that link. Let's just add link to notes so everybody's clear where it is.
And just to note that Nikhil did send an email to Kubernetes dev so that.
Yeah, that's true. That actually brings up another topic, which is there are a bunch of things that sort of ideally need to be done in order to have a functioning SIG. So one example would be having people actively help people on Slack channels, having people notice when critical bugs get filed and either prioritizing them or finding someone to fix them or fixing themselves or whatever. We don't have that. It's sort of informal at the moment, and in practice it doesn't work because most of them just go kind of ignored until I get to them, and I don't necessarily have the time to do that as a permanent full-time job. So one question that comes up is, do we want those kinds of tasks? So let's say a critical bug gets reported and it's just before the release, and as you said before, as we previously discussed, that won't necessarily generate a merge blocker, but it could be a reasonably serious bug. Do we want that to be part of what the on-call does as part of their standard duties, is just to keep an eye out for bugs that are filed and make sure that the important ones are appropriately dealt with? My experience is that it's a fairly slow trickle at the moment, like 5 a week, give or take, maybe 10, and that it's probably very few of them are critical, if any. But just making sure that they don't, just sit there for 3 months when they do happen seems like a good thing. And secondly, there are a bunch of kind of questions and Q&A type stuff on the Slack channel. The more difficult ones of which often go unanswered. There's a lot of community help on the easier stuff, but on the stuff that kind of requires someone active on this team to give a considered answer, those often go unanswered until I answer them. So that's the second question: is do we want the on-call to perhaps do a once a day or a couple of times a week review of the Slack channel and just check that everything necessary has been responded to? Any opinions? Hello?
Yep, I think it's a necessity, definitely. Yeah, I think, but whether on call, it was called build cop earlier, so we can extend the responsibility if others agree.
I have mixed feelings. I mean, historically, the Googlers have done a good job of, supporting people in the Slack channel and otherwise. Maybe up until the split, I was also trying to be as helpful as I could. Not always very helpful, of course, but I think the idea of like on-call rotation or something for that seems kind of strange to me. And there needs to be collective responsibility and incentive for people to care. And having a sign-up list and say, oh, you got to do this, that to me, if we need that, that suggests that there's not a very cohesive sense of purpose or mission for the SIG. And I think that's a much deeper issue that really needs to be addressed ahead of just signing people up for things.
Be happy to have it as a separate group of people, or I mean, it just seems like it's been sort of self-managed up to now, and it's just not working. I don't think we need to kind of cry wolf and say we have a huge disaster problem. We just need to make sure that either we do something to foster a stronger community around this stuff so that it works without any form of management, or we just put some light management around it to say that, either the SIG leads do that, or the on-call does that, or somebody else does that. I don't think we need to, get too introspective.
I think we're kind of in a transition period, and I can certainly understand your concern that there isn't really sufficient attention on supporting, what's in place right now. And my view is that this will change as soon as we get out of repo and things sort of restart. Then we're going to have a lot of developers who have a vested interest in people using and having good experiences with what they're developing. And right now we're kind of in this limbo period where, I mean, maybe on Huawei's side, you guys are using it and have more incentive, but you don't really like being like the only people on the hook, and I can understand that. But until, say, we have the Red Hat people on board and up to speed, I'm not sure that us committing resource to support is going to make any sense. So it's going to happen. I'm convinced of that. I'm just thinking it might take like a couple of weeks to a month before we get people sort of in the loop again.
Okay, that's fine. Do you guys have an update on that? I think last time we spoke, people were sort of wrapping up their 1.8 tasks, which I assume are done now. And I see there are 5-ish Red Hatters on the call. If this is, are these people all kind of available now to work on these things, or not yet?
Not yet. We still have some internal things that aren't related to 1.8, but they're related to getting OpenShift 3.7 at the door.
Okay, makes sense. Just thought I'd touch base.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, we've also been pretty busy internally with other stuff too, so it's a common situation. I guess as long as you don't end up in a situation where everybody's now busy on 1.9 and can't do anything either. Okay.
Yeah.
But we'll revisit this in a couple of weeks' time. That sounds good to me.
Just a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to jump back to earlier in the minutes, but finish what you were saying first.
I was kind of going to suggest the same thing. We didn't really talk at all about the effort to move things out of core. And that probably is something we should talk about.
Absolutely. So we can do that. Basically, no progress in the last 2 weeks. It was a national holiday in India last week. and I've been tied up with other things, and nobody else is really involved in that. So it's.
Are you talking to move out of repo?
No, I'm talking about the API redesign.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
So yeah, just we've got 11 minutes left. So is there any update on the cluster registry stuff?
Yes. So I have been, late last week and early this week, I've been trying to go through the API doc and resolve what seemed like to be the outstanding issues. I have some time set up with Eric Chang this week to talk about auth specifically. Once those conversations are a bit more fully formed, I'll bring information back here to discuss it in the broader context of the SIG. I've been in talks with other people internally about sort of repository process and release process and testing process and attempts to get things set up there. So again, those conversations are all very early on, but I think once there's more to report, I will bring it back. I will send out an email to the mailing list. I'm also working on a doc, which is sort of like a high-level project plan for the cluster registry, which should include, for example, milestones and issues about testing and releasing and a high-level design, which I hope to share with the SIG later this week. The intention for that is not so much to define how I've been thinking about it, but also to provide a platform for people to basically comment and tell me where I'm wrong, because I would like to find out where I'm wrong now and where people disagree and don't think it's a good idea. But I will share that with the SIG later this week. Besides that, there are a few open PRs in the cluster registry for setting up initial things. It currently is still in a state where it works. I don't know of anyone who's using it. I will probably start, I think at this point, people are welcome to start playing with it if they would like. It should be functional. Yeah, that's really where the cluster registry is right now. If anybody wants to contribute, feel free just to jump in. I know the documentation isn't very good yet. There's a lot of things like documentation that I'm trying to make sure that I don't just spend time documenting things when no one is actually reading them or using them, which is a bit of a catch-22 because inadequate docs means people don't necessarily know how to contribute. So then there aren't people contributing, so there's no incentive to write documentation. So I will try to bootstrap some more documentation this week. Yeah. And if anybody has comments, concerns, just feel free to email me or write me up on Slack.
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks for starting to use polls into that repo. It's been good to be able to see what's been going on. I did make a comment very early on something that I've been going back and forth with you on over GitHub. So sorry for the latency, and just wanted to make sure you knew that I had commented on it so you could take a look. It's about some of the API stuff vis-a-vis JSON.
Yes, I've definitely seen your comments. I had been sort of waiting to resolve them. I guess I wanted to talk more with some people who are more up on the Kubernetes API conventions. So I think your comments make sense, but I don't have enough experience or knowledge myself of the standards to necessarily resolve them myself.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that we could do is we could probably engage some folks in the API machinery channel and get an API review from one of them. I don't think any of the things that we've been kind of going discussing have been especially contentious. They're just like, I will tell you and everybody else from my experience building API servers outside of main Kubernetes and service catalog, that the API conventions can be difficult to interpret. So I don't think that there's anything more than like, it's not especially clear reading the conventions documents, so you have to apply them. And then there's also the fact that the conventions document does not actually match some of the conventions sometimes on the ground. So I'd be happy to if we can find a time to connect on Slack and just like start shouting for help in API machinery.
That makes sense. I know that Daniel Smith read the API doc and left some comments on it a while ago, but he has not circled back. So we can ping the SIG API machinery again and get some more feedback to make sure that it makes sense.
Okay. I can also see if I can get someone's time at Red Hat who is extremely knowledgeable about those things to sit down with us.
I would appreciate that, because I think there are some outstanding issues that I think it would be helpful to get somebody from SIG API machinery to kind of weigh in and make a final decision. Because I think there are a few things that have been going a bit back and forth, especially around the names of fields, the state spec status. That has been something that's been going back and forth for a while. And I think
Jonathan, I would suggest you almost never can get consensus on naming and stuff like that. So, I think what you have to do is just take the input from people and then make your best judgment call.
Okay.
And sometimes a decision is better than no decision, even if it's,
I agree with
not something that makes everybody happy.
Okay.
I think really like to debate names. It's rarely productive to debate them for more than 5 or 10 minutes. But I do think that probably the more fundamental issue is that the cluster registry API currently is not one that has spec and status that I could see being a hump to get over with some people. Personally, like I have been thinking about that. I haven't, I don't think it's problematic for me personally. I think that the way that it's outlined in the pull request that you made, actually, that is the one that we've been doing most of the discussion on. That the comment, which is like saying that it's not spec because it doesn't represent user intent. It's not status because it's not something that a controller makes happen that gets reconciled. It's not really a spec and status state reconciler type API. It makes sense to me. I could see it being alien to other folks. So, it might be worth having some discussion perhaps with SIG Arch too. We've found that to be pretty productive in service catalog. Is that not necessarily that we can't make a decision on ourselves, but something that we need some validation from a higher power, let's say.
Yeah, I think at the very least, it seems like we need to update the API conventions with whatever the conventional wisdom is across the board today. Because the API conventions as they stand today don't really directly address what we're trying to do here. There's at the very least sufficient ambiguity that the answer is not clear. And so that seems to be worth understanding what the general consensus is and updating the docs and then saying we just followed the docs and we didn't have to have a debate because the docs told us what to do.
I agree.
Just,
and note for, in the interest of full disclosure, I have a number of things that we found during building Kubernetes service catalog that needed to be clarified about the API conventions documents. Some of those things people have started. I would say maybe 10% of them have actually been updated. So in another thread for me, this is a timely issue to bring up because it's something that I'm already interested in getting clarified because it doesn't actually do much good sometimes to have a document if the document's unclear. And we definitely don't want to like spend energy getting over these things and then say, "Ooh, glad that's over," and just not update anything. So it's important.
So basically, we can blame it all on you, Paul. It's always good to have someone to blame stuff on.
There we go.
So Paul, if you could follow up on those, if you do have a thread already open about that, I'd appreciate it if you could definitely follow up on that. That would help me out a lot because I don't really have any channels necessarily to talk about this easily.
Okay. Well, let's talk on Slack, and probably today won't be a very good day for me, but maybe tomorrow or Thursday
Okay.
I can at least try to give you the rundown of things that we found and see what like the Venn diagram is, like what things have you hit, which I suspect there are maybe one or two that we didn't, and we'll try to see if we can include some of the API machinery folks or maybe SIG architecture for those things.
Thanks. I'd appreciate that. So I'll ping you tomorrow on Slack.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. The two items I just want to speed through before we all get kicked out of our various rooms. The one is that we have successfully triaged all the issues. So in particular, for E2, 75 issues that have been triaged to be required for GA. So if you have cycles or if you're looking for something to do, that list under that link is a good place to go. Find stuff that is unassigned and assign yourself to it. Similarly, if you have yourself assigned to one of those items, the assumption is that you are kind of either actively working on it or planning to work on it in the near future. If you have yourself assigned to issues that you have no plan to work on, please unassign yourself so that we can find the right people. And secondly, just a very brief update in the last 10 seconds. Where do we stand with the move out of repo? I think we were planning to be essentially done around about now. Any guesstimate?
Yep. That actually is not the case right now. So I was on vacation last 2 weeks. So Maru has made some progress in that. He would be able to probably update exactly the status what it is, but it's not complete. That's what I can say as a very short update.
Maru, would you mind giving us a quick summary in the notes there? Because I think everyone's about to get kicked out of their various rooms. At least we've got a record for next time.
I'm hoping to have CI jobs running this week and maybe consider cutover as early as next week. But I'm going to coordinate with Shashi and Irfan around getting that done.
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.